Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to those out west. Welcome to the information session for registrants to the Interdisciplinary Challenge Teams program for Genome Canada's and the Genome Enterprises Climate Smart Ag and Food Systems Challenge. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. I'm going to open the session with a land acknowledgement and then provide an opportunity for our CSO, Catalina Lopez Correa, to provide a few opening comments. Then I'll launch into a little bit of an info session leading into our discussion rooms. So I'd like to begin this event with a territorial acknowledgement as a reminder of a call to action for ourselves and others. Today, we are gathering on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. We recognize past and ongoing injustices perpetrated against Indigenous peoples as part of the colonial project in Canada, including violence, oppression, land theft, and harmful attempts to erase culture. Given Canada's colonial foundation and how it shapes the discourse and practice of science, especially genetics and related health and biomedical research, Genome Canada commits to fostering Indigenous truth, reconciliation, and engagement in our research teams to address the gaps in the participation of underrepresented, equity-deserving, and Indigenous groups in Canada's genomics research agenda and landscapes, data sets, and governance. Genome Canada commits to working in co-creative partnership with Indigenous researchers, leaders, and organizations to develop and support a standalone and distinctions-based strategy to bolster Indigenous genomics leadership in Canada. To that, we are exploring ways of having Indigenous participation in the design, decision-making process, implementation, and outreach for future Genome Canada challenges in health, environment, climate action, food systems, and all the areas that genomics touches on. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to open the floor to Catalina, our CSO, to provide a few opening comments. Catalina.
Merci, thank you, Ryan. And bonjour à tous. Vraiment plaisir d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. And thank you all for joining us. It is, as you know, an important moment for centers and all the applicants. This is the first time we are doing a session like the one we're doing today, with all the registrants having a unique and important moment for all of us. As you know, we are now, Genome Canada, transitioning from focusing on large-scale programs, as we did before with the LSARP competitions, into challenge-driven initiatives. And of course, Ryan will explain a little bit more about that. But it's really, the focus is really more about collaboration, about the collective impact we can have with the investments and the projects we are supporting. So is a new, I would say, a new adventure, is a new way of working. And we, again, are excited about the quality and really the topics of all the projects that have been submitted now for registration. I think we had great opportunities to really have a real impact in Canada, and that impact then being much stronger by just working all together and, you know, reinforcing and increasing and exponentially, hopefully increasing the impact of those projects by working together. So with that, again, thanks for joining us today. As a key word for this day, I think is, you know, focusing on challenges, focusing on solutions, challenges like climate change and the agriculture. Now, and the other keyword I would say that is critical for us is collaboration and working together towards a common goal. So again, thanks for, we have an exciting way where we can, the centers can work with you to get to the best of your projects, and we can work with you and with the centers to make sure we have a strong portfolio of projects at the end of the process. So with that, I will leave you with Ryan. That will have a presentation, give you more detail to ask your questions, share
Oh, well, I think it
We
just
lost
degraded.
Catalina. Yeah.
We've lost you, Catalina. It's degraded away. So I can take it from here as soon as the lag catches up. All right. So thank you, Catalina, for the introduction. And I think as you were closing out, the general theme was sort of reinforced the desire for cooperation, collaboration, I think is the name of the game for how the ICT and associated hubs will work together to create impact beyond the amazing research that the individual ICTs will contribute. I think we'll catch up eventually, but I can move ahead with the current theme. So with no further ado, I'll just open up a slide deck that I have prepared to help guide us through the conversation to follow. I hate to say this that way, but can everybody see my slides? Okay, I got a thumbs up. Thank you, Evan. All right, so we're going to launch into this discussion on the ICT information group here. So let me go to the next slide. All right, so basically at the core of the agenda, we're going to open up with a little bit of a information discussion on the program and on the portfolio concept, which I think is something really, it's what's really different in this version of how we're going to be addressing this challenge. During this initial presentation, we'll have a Slido Q&A space open. So if you would like to ask questions, we'll be collecting all of our questions over the course of the presentation to help form a Q&A document at the end that will be shared with all the attendants and registrants to make sure that we capture all of the questions, ideas, comments, and are able to share them to everyone. So once you're in slide.do, you can add hashtag climate challenge, and that will enable you to use the space to ask questions. Following that open discussion, which is recorded so that we can share it, we will then break out into 2 rounds of 3 discussion rooms. These are going to be facilitated discussions where we're going to have a brief introduction to frame the theme. And then really what we're trying to do here is just encourage an open discussion. So there'll be prompts to certain elements, certain thematic concepts that are important to the ICT and the portfolio concept. But we really encourage everybody to speak openly, to ask questions. To that end, the breakout sessions will not be recorded. But we do have a leader representative from every Genome Center present to make sure that we're capturing the themes and concepts that are going to be put together and anonymized for the reporting. Speaking of those breakout rooms, there's going to be 2 rounds of 3, as I said. The first round is going to focus on 3 themes: portfolio, knowledge mobilization, and systems level thinking or systems level design. The attendants, you are all free to enter whichever room you want and to skip between rooms as you see fit. In the second round, we're going to have themes of co-opetition, metrics, measurements, impact, and stakeholders and engagement in general. So you can plan a little bit ahead for which rooms you want to be sitting in on. They might change, of course, as we go through this initial presentation. So into the concept of the challenge. Why challenges, right? And essentially, we've seen the evolution over the past few decades of, individual researcher-led programs to large consortia and collaborations of researchers contributing to solving tougher and tougher scientific challenges. But sign of the times with climate change, the extreme temperatures that cities all over the world are facing today, even, we're facing even more complex global challenges that really require a collaborative approach of different minds to address and solve. And this is a collaboration between researchers, implementers, society, the regulators and policymakers that will take up the fruits of your labors in order to create a change in the world that we desperately need to address these global challenges. Climate action is absolutely required given the risks that we're facing. And our current initiative in climate smart agriculture and food systems is intended to address the risks of climate impact through the lens of mitigation. So in general, impact-driven challenge investment is this confluence of fundamental and applied research that includes at its core knowledge mobilization and implementation activities designed into it from the beginning. So really working together as a community of engaged stakeholders, coordinating our efforts to align the individual outputs of our efforts, mutually reinforce each other, and drive towards a broader national impact, and in fact global impact, as we export the fruit or the benefits of what we're going to be creating together. And really the core of it is that you bring together these stakeholders led by researcher-led projects into a portfolio of projects supported by sort of cross-cutting elements that amplify the individual contributions of each project into a sum that's greater than the parts. So specifically for this challenge, we're allocating $30 million to launch the Climate Action Genomics Initiative in Climate Smart Ag and Food Systems. And this includes essentially 3 core activities. The one that we're engaging a discussion on today is the central one that incorporates about $24 million to fund interdisciplinary research that will deliver the genomic-focused solutions and applications to support mitigation and climate action. There will also be 2 sort of coordinating hubs, the Data Coordination Center and the Knowledge Mobilization Implementation Center, that are there to support and help drive towards impact the activities of the ICTs. The core of it, as we're talking about today, is the interdisciplinary challenge teams focusing in on reducing the carbon footprint of Canadian food systems. And that's the food system as a whole, whether it's agriculture, agri-food, processing, aquaculture, alternative novel protein approaches, everything that sort of supports the production and consumption of food in Canada and what we export to the rest of the world as well. It involves teams of researchers working together, asking specific questions, and driving towards key deliverables, both technical and social, ethical, legal implications thereof. And the idea is that we'll work together to increase the value of our food systems without increasing greenhouse gas emissions or actually reducing them, and making sure that we're not having more negative impact on the environment. And so you're working together as part of a portfolio, each sort of amplifying each other's projects into a greater whole. And part of this is that it's happening at the entirety of the food system, right? So emissions are produced across the food system. And if you incorporate the concept of the food system as production, growing crops or livestock or anything like that, the processing of it into value-added products or finished food products, shipping those products around, the fuel costs of operating on the farm, as well as getting the stuff to the various consumers, the actual way that consumers buy and access food, huge implications for food security. The way that the customers consume the product, and along with that, the wastage that's associated with producing or leftover consumption, unconsumed product, which can result in tremendous emissions results. And of course, the cycle closes through the valorization of waste streams into new production, new aspects, new enhancements. So it's a fully integrated system, and it's important that we keep this in mind when we are considering how our projects, how your individual projects can fit into the food system to demonstrate impact. And this goes beyond the specific deliverables of your project, which, as I've seen from the amazing quality of the registrations out there, we've got a wide range of impacts in a variety of regions that can really sort of come together to inform each other and create more value across the food system. But you can see certain different aspects, whether you're reducing the need for a fertilizer, improving nutrient efficiency, or improving soil health. All of these pieces can come together in the concept of reinforcing each other just in the bubble of production. But when you start to expand beyond that into how you're going to use wastage or these other types of concepts, you can really start to amplify the benefits of the individual projects into a broader national impact. And so to make sure along those lines of that concept of impact creation, to help you demonstrate your potential in your upcoming applications, it's important that you have clear deliverables that have a potential to benefit Canadian food systems and society in general. It's important that you demonstrate engagement with users and ideally other stakeholders to ensure that the uptake of your research occurs and there's practical application and implementation in our society. It's important that there's a well-integrated GELS research component that investigates the factors that are, facilitating or acting as barriers to the uptakes of the genomics-based applications and solutions that will be coming out of this project. And ideally moving beyond the identification of the challenges and the proposal and creation of the solutions that address these barriers. It's important that there's a sound data management plan associated with it in terms of standards, storage, sharing, all of these different aspects that I'm sure you're all familiar with and well detailed in the funding opportunity. But it's also important to recognize that as part of a portfolio, you're making a commitment to leverage each other's contributions, approaches, processes to create superior national data assets, standards, protocols, and sharing mechanisms. And most importantly, I think it's important that you are able to express how, as a portfolio, you're willing and open to working together to advance the portfolio goals. You are, of course, trusted to deliver on the objectives that you are proposing to in the project as skilled practitioners, scientists, and highly experienced producers of knowledge. But we're taking a step forward here that will require us to tune and tailor what we're achieving and pursuing in our individual projects to create something greater at the portfolio level. So in terms of that review process for how we're going to be going through this ICT challenge, we went through the registration. This is where we are now. The registrants are the eligible registrants. We went through an eligibility review for some core criteria like ability or focus on the program objectives of mitigation of food systems in Canada. The centrality of genomics or omics and biotechnology in creating and addressing the questions and challenges proposed, the well-integrated GELS component, and the ability to align and amplify into a broader national impact or potential thereof. So we went through the eligibility requirements. All projects were quite successful, and those projects were posted on the web, as well as shared with each of you in that registration booklet. And part of the purpose of having that registration booklet is to be able to enable you to reach out to other colleagues in the field to discuss your projects, coordinate your activities, and identify ways that you can reinforce each other to support the strength of your applications and the concept of the portfolio. From the registration stage, all of you successfully eligible registrants will be pushing towards the letter of intent phase. Now, the core review for that essentially is focusing in on the well-established, internationally recognized review process from Genome Canada, focusing in on continuing to maintain your eligibility, although that shouldn't change, and focusing in on the technical merit quality of the research, as well as the GELS research and the potential benefits to Canadian society. There's also going to be sort of new under this particular program, an assessment of the potential to act as a portfolio. And you'll see in the funding opportunity, there's a series of three key components that are sort of being assessed for that portfolio review. These are assessed at a high level at the letter of intent stage. They become more relevant at the full application stage, where we will continue to review according to those core criteria, but really dig into the potential for synergies and mutual reinforcement between projects, the potential availability and commitment to coordination across those projects, and the potential for building the contributions of those projects into a broader national impact. So like I said, there are certain types of activities that you can see feed together the results from one to the other and can be mutually reinforcing towards a greater end. All of this leading towards a decision and communication of funding acceptance by the end of March 2023. In tandem, the funding opportunity for the Data Coordination Center and the funding opportunity for the Knowledge Mobilization Implementation Coordinating Center will also be occurring. And they will be wrapping up around the time as the decisions for the ICTs, leading to, in July 2023, a convening event of all of the teams that are part of that portfolio, where you will be working together to identify opportunities to align and sort of reframe key activities towards the broader objectives of the portfolio. So I'll dig into a little bit more of this portfolio concept here. So this is really that distinguishing feature of this approach. And so the initiative is funding the projects as well as those cross-cutting programs that are going to be focused on knowledge mobilization, implementation, and data coordination. So what this does, it allows the solution of one project to really cascade throughout the food system, to be taken up and to be implemented, and to work together to coordinate different activities. For instance, if the barriers to the implementation of 2 or 3 genomic solutions is a regulatory barrier, we can work together to create a cohesive project, a cohesive approach, and bring the regulators into the portfolio activities to make sure that we are addressing these barriers proactively and getting ahead of the challenges to realizing the value that is created by our work. So why do we have these connector hubs? They're really there because they're there to coordinate the activities, to support the coordination of activities and sharing and knowledge creation, knowledge mobilization of the different projects in the portfolio, to really enable that synergy to materialize, right? To see that greater value created from the joint activities. And so I think key words here are coordination to add value, and also importantly, fill in the gaps. So this is that concept of mutual reinforcement. Each group, each team does certain things very, very well. Those things could be eminently useful to the activities of other teams, but it's really but each team has only a certain set of resources, whether human or fiscal or infrastructure. And so it's at the coordination of these various teams with their various strengths that you're able to reinforce each other's activities and drive towards a more successful outcome, a greater impact. And so, as part of the portfolio of teams, what you're going to get out of it as an ICT researcher is an increase in the impact of your work, an increased visibility of your contributions in your community or in greater Canadian society, an increase in the scale and scope of your network, since you'll be through these hubs working with policymakers, regulators, amplifying together your interactions. There's a huge potential for these hubs, for the GELS teams from each ICT to be working together in a coordinated, aligned way to really percolate the information across the projects and amplify its power. Through that impact, you're going to be really driving towards social, environmental, and economic benefit of your individual projects, so that you can really realize the change that you want in the world. And this is the sort of the strength of the portfolio, is that as a group, you're able to think of the change that we're trying to achieve in the world. In this case, really improving the carbon footprint of our ag and food systems for a variety of reasons. And then working together, figuring out how you're going to work together to make that as possible and as strong as it can be. And really, when it comes to our ag and food systems, there's the benefits of mitigation for us in the health of how we contribute to the global challenge of addressing climate impact. But there's also the economic and social benefits of the producers in this country, as well as our leadership position as a breadbasket to the rest of the world, right? As climate change continues to exacerbate drought, cataclysmic weather events, we are in a position to alleviate some of those challenges through the fact that Canada is just a leader in the production and processing and export of food. So nifty graphic or confusogram, as it's depending on your perspective. Essentially, this is trying to be an example of this idea of how climate impact within individual ICTs and the shared components come together to drive towards grander scale impact. And so really the ICTs are individual projects working together. They're supported by the CAMIC and DCC. And so the ICTs interact with the CAMIC on driving knowledge mobilization to internal and external stakeholders, best positioned to actually take this up and realize value, greater value. You'll be working with the DCC to share data, processes, learnings, standards, align on standards, and really unlock the power of the interface of your data and everything that you're creating to really drive towards climate impact. And genomics is well positioned to demonstrate data leadership in Canada, in this country, in order for AI, which Canada is investing very heavily in, to really be able to materialize its strength. You need a lot of data, and genomics is incredibly well positioned, has a long track record of generating massive amounts of data. It's the Data Coordination Center that will be supporting researchers to be able to get more out of what they are already going to produce within the projects. The CAMIC will really focus on genomics and society efforts to leverage what's coming out of the projects and drive towards implementation and manifest impact. The Data Coordination Center, for those other reasons, will also be coming together. So all of this working in an aligned fashion unites and amplifies towards a greater impact.